Good evening, everybody. This is Bhumika Vashisht, a chartered accountant and manager of VAT reporting content. Thank you all for joining this inspiring and power-packed Women of Avalara session. Manjula Muthukrishnan, a successful tax technologist, in conversation with Radha Arun, a woman of immense repute in customs and indirect taxes. I must say, we had quite a response on our WOA Slack channel with questions pouring from Ms. Radha from women employees all over the globe. So if you have more questions coming up during the session, so please send them in the Q&A tab for Ms. Radha to address at the end of the session. Without much ado, I would like to introduce our very own Manjula Muthukrishnan, Managing Director, India. So Manjula joined Avalara on 3rd June 2019, just when the company was embarking to the next phase of growth. With over 25 years of experience in information technology and digital transformation, she's responsible for defining and delivering the business strategy for end-to-end tax automation and in the Indian market, providing an overall leadership for the strategic operations in India. We all know her as a powerhouse combination of deep experience in global digital transformation, a creative leadership style, and a passion for her team. Thank you, Manjula, for agreeing to do this. And I would now like to welcome a strong, passionate female role model in the tax world and our guest of honor this evening, Ms. Radha Arun. Ms. Radha has served as an Indian Revenue Officer for 22 years until 2004 and has been consulting thereon. Her successful journey is diverse, covering almost all areas of customs, excise, and service tax department, contributing to her overall goal, which is the goal to promote a well-informed compliance with tax law. She has also maintained her independent spirit in her profession in writing. Ms. Radha is a significant contributor to the ICAI material on GST and has authored the Halsbury Laws of India, along with numerous other articles on taxation. Her area of expertise also includes extensive field work engaging with anti-smuggling and anti-tax evasion. She's also making a significant contribution to the society with her expertise in teaching and training on forums. These include the department's Training Institute for Officers and Chamber of Commerce. It is an honor to have you here, ma'am, and inspire all of us with your story. Thank you for doing this with us. And over to you if you would like to share anything with our fellow Avalarians before we start the conversation.
Thank you, Bhumika. You've said plenty as it is. Maybe I'll just add a couple of lines on my personal details, which are not put up in any public forum because I'm a very private person. So in this context, because we are going to discuss, what it is to be a woman, work-life balance, etc. I have a very loving family consisting of a daughter and a son. Both are in their 30s now, and a lovely daughter-in-law. I'm blessed to have my parents also still with us. And they all live in Bangalore. I visit very frequently. I'm based in Hyderabad. And yes, tax is my passion. Well-informed tax compliance on the part of the taxpayer and transparency from the government. These are my two, the twin stars that are my goals. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Radha. You can't imagine the kind of excitement that we've had ever since we announced that you're going to be coming and speaking with us. It's been amazing. I already have some questions that we've picked up from the channel, and we'll keep looking at the questions that are coming up while we speak. But, let me tell you, the response has been tremendous. And we are honored to have you here. And when before we start this question and answer session, I really want to thank one person who made it happen. That's Funny Krishna. Without him, we wouldn't have been able to make this. I'm not sure if he's around. He's had a personal emergency because of which he was off yesterday. So I'm not sure if he's there. If he's there, Krishna, thank you so much for getting us to be in touch with Radha. So I'm going to ask you, start with something different, right? All of us, when we hear an IRS officer, it's always this movie scenes that come into our mind, right? The screeching of tires, you know, these men running out, trying and looking at files in somebody's house, throwing things around. That's how the image is built over a period of time, at least by Indian movies, right? You've been an IRS official for 22 years and now a financial consultant. That's a long journey, right? And how difficult was it for you to be a woman, you know, in a supposedly a man's field and thriving in your field of expertise?
To begin with, the image that you presented, you know, from the movies, it's not far wrong. We've done all that. And being a woman in that scenario was not very easy. The thing is that the men have a stereotypical way of handling these situations. There's a lot of, you know, bluff and bluster and shouting, and it's all unnecessary. You can do the same things in a matter-of-fact way. So yeah, I've been in the situations, and we've done it all pretty calmly. Now, the other thing you asked me is, how difficult is it to be a woman in my field of expertise? Now, we were first talking about the action scenes. Yeah, in the action scenes, being a woman was one kind of problem. Yeah, I must give this illustration of how it was in the action scenes, because you know, these are things you cannot share actually with anybody. You cannot tell your colleagues or your seniors. I went on a search operation once, and where it's a residential search, I used to insist on being present, because you know, the guys would not comport themselves in the way they should unless there was somebody to hold them in check. So we went to the residence of this person on whom we had intelligence, and we were searching it. And especially bedroom search, I would insist on doing personally. Got into it, opened the cupboards, was taking out all the, you know, there were various documents, files, etc. So the owner comes in and says, "Let me help you with that." And he picks up one book and says, "Come sit down and I'll show you. This is important." And when he opened it, it was all pornography. You know, and he's turning page by page and saying, "Yeah, look at this, look at this." I said, "Listen, close this and put it away, and let's continue with work." And there is nothing I could do about this, because you have to take a choice in that situation, whether you're being a woman or you're being a tax officer. And I obviously chose to be a tax officer. So that is anyway history after I've left the department. Even in one's field of expertise, you know, there is always this slight trying to brush you aside because you're a woman. Initially, I used to face this, you know, where you are in a meeting and they will try to tell you the ABC of something when you're trying to make a sophisticated argument. But finally, you know, knowledge is my mantra. Finally, it pays because people need that knowledge, and then they come to you for it.
That's absolutely great, because, you know, it definitely makes a lot of difference when someone knows that you know what you're talking about. You know, you are an expert in the field, the perception changes drastically, right? And my next question is that, you know, we've talked about this bias and how women are treated, right? What advice would you give, you know, your 25-year-old self about how to thrive as a female in a workplace now?
That's an interesting question. My 25-year-old self. Well, you know, what I would tell my 25-year-old self and any young person who is in the workplace, who's just beginning a career, is that nothing is personal. You know, work in the workplace, have professional relationships. Don't keep on wasting mental energy on why did he look at me like this? Why did she say that? You know, just take things at face value and handle them. All these deep emotional things belong in the personal sphere.
That is great, because, yeah. women do a lot of that. I was just going to say that, right? We need to learn to compartmentalize. We need to learn to be transaction based. I think that's a great learning. And we need to be careful about doing that at workplace.
Yeah.
You did talk about some challenges that you faced, right? What were, some of the biggest challenges, inevitable ones that you've come across in your journey?
Well, in the specific journey that I had to undertake, challenge number one was corruption. Okay. Dealing with staff who are in the default mode, by default, their default mode is corruption. It required a lot of retuning because you cannot eradicate it, you cannot condone it. And the thing you have to do is how to draw lines. So that's the thing I had to learn to do, how to draw lines and how to deal with it pragmatically and how to be very strict when the line is crossed. So again, I can give you an example, and this created a bit of controversy. I was posted in this customs anti-smuggling unit, and they were a notoriously, when I was posted there, everybody said, how will you handle this? They were a notoriously corrupt bunch. And I'd got them together and given them a talk saying, listing out the various things I will not tolerate. Okay, so making my position very clear. Now, one day we used to go, at that time there was this smuggling of third-party goods that used to take place from the Bangladesh border to Delhi. And we were, my place of posting was on a crucial station on the way. So we used to undertake checking of trains on the way. And this team goes and comes back saying, nothing was there today. And the next morning, somebody comes to me saying that I was on that train and I was carrying a load of 20 VCRs. In those days, it was video cassette recorders. That was the big thing, being smuggled. Yep. And these guys took it away from me and did not draw up any papers. And when I went and complained to the police in charge of the station, police of the railway station, he sent me to you. So I took a complaint from him in writing, and then there was this whole team practically, except 2 or 3 who were part of this this whole thing. And I had to sort of indulge in a lot of pressuring of that team, and I made them write out. I said, I have a written confession. I will suspend you all unless you admit to it in writing and promise me you won't do it again. And then I got written confessions from them, and work went on as usual. When I told my boss, she said, how could you do this? You should have, instituted disciplinary proceedings immediately. Then who's going to do the work? If I suspend all these people, who's going to do the work? So one has to be pragmatic. But at the same time, when I did this, I made them go, and they'd gone and sold everything in the market. I made them go and buy it all back, drop the official documents, and show a seizure of the stuff as on the previous day. That was, it's a solution one has to think of, one has to be pragmatic, one has to at the same time see that the lesson gets across, that, and the public confidence was, oh my God, enhanced like anything by this, because the whole bazaar knew the story, that these people were made to go and buy it back. So one had to deal with corruption in all kinds of creative ways. A corrupt boss was a different issue. If, God forbid, you had a corrupt boss, there was nothing you could do about it. So, you just had to let it go.
I have to say that your life has been much more exciting than any of the careers that we're dealing here.
Yeah, it has been quite exciting. And corruption. The other issue in a revenue department for an officer functioning there and for a consultant dealing with the department once one comes out is the what they call the revenue mindset. The mindset of the revenue official is by hook or crook, he has to get the tax. Okay, the whether it is fair or unfair is simply not relevant. Now, I, on the other hand, was programmed to be very helpful to the assessee. Okay, so these two things clashed like anything. And I had to slowly learn to modify this method of finding, of looking, each time I was deciding a case, of looking for the way of somehow giving the benefit to the taxpayer. And instead, asking myself, okay, what are let me identify all the hurdles in the way of saying this fellow has to pay tax. Okay. And if I cannot deal with all the hurdles as a tax officer, then I will allow him the benefit, which is still much more than any tax official did. Okay. Dealing with this revenue mindset, which is something that is natural because of the fear of the Controller and Auditor General and the fear of the Central Bureau of Investigation. This is what keeps the officer all the time not willing to put his head on the chopping block, rather perfectly ready to deny the benefit. So somehow one had to deal with this and go along.
Yeah, I mean, it looks, definitely, we can hear how innovative you've been in terms of, managing different sides of, the government requirements versus what happens to people on the other side. And it's been really, really innovative and absolutely amazing to hear that story. But you also, at that point of time, had to manage a family, right? How did you balance all of this? You had all of this pressure at home, at work, and then you also had your children. And how did you manage?
These two little children had to be all the time taken into confidence. So my children grew up on smuggler stories, and I feel also that it's not such a bad thing, because if we are, our work ethic is a very important value which we want to pass on to our children. And it is not enough to tell the children, you must study, you must work for your exams. It's a very powerful model if they see the parent actually doing it. The parent working at her own work with all this passion and sincerity, as long as they know that it is work and they are told, it's not difficult to simplify, I was able to tell them in very easy terms as to why this is important. What will happen if I don't go to office at 8 p.m. today and do this particular thing? And it was fine.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not saying there were many times of guilt I suffered. And I remember once I was sitting in the doctor's consulting room when I was expecting my second child. And I was, I thought it is difficult enough with one, and now with the second coming, I think I should just leave my job. And it so happened that another woman who had been sitting there, she looked familiar. I looked at her again and she said, "Hey, you're Radha." I said, "Yeah." And it turned out she was with me in college. So we got to talking and I shared this angst with her. And she said, "Listen, never leave your job." And I don't know, she said, whether I told you that my mother was the first collector of customs. It's such a coincidence, right? I met this woman she said, my mother was the first collector of customs. Her name is Kaushalya Narayanan. We had all heard about her. I didn't know this was her daughter. And she said, we were so proud of her, True, she was not there when we came home from school, but she took every care to see that we had what we needed. She would phone us from office and we were so proud of her. So don't ever, leave your job for the short term. It's just a short period. And that sort of buoyed me up and kept me going.
And actually that's a very, 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 very important point for women who are grappling with that question, right? It isn't something that happened, even today. There are people who actually rethink as to what should the priorities be, right? And I think you made an absolutely valid point. One is to actually go, when you're going through it, you think through your priorities really well. And the second is also to have, though you met that person by chance, I would say there's someone who actually gave you the right perspective, a mentor, a coach, could actually help during those times to really, tell you what you should be doing. And all of us, I think all working women carry a lot of guilt about,
Yes.
you know, when you are at work, you think of your house. When you are at your house, you think you're not doing your job right. And we punish ourselves too much, I guess.
Yes. We
All
do.
right, Anna, now I'm going to ask you a couple of questions related to tax, you know, and I know that's your passion, right? And you also mentioned transparency in tax compliance is something that you are really, really passionate about, right? So if you really look at India, you know, the digital wave has played a significant part in introduction of the GST wave in India, right? So what are your thoughts on adapting to tax administration technology and the role of technology as an enabler for future tax function?
Look, the model I have before me for comparison is the customs EDI. And the customs EDI has worked very well. The customs EDI was, you know, well thought out, and incrementally it was, you know, expanded, and nothing was done in haste. It was, so it not only works well, it is very transparent. Like if you enter your port and your bill of entry number, for example, you will get it shows you where, at what stage of processing your particular bill of entry is. GST at present has not got there. And there is a certain there is a certain opaqueness in the system. Like you file a claim, for example, and after that, you just don't know what is happening. This is, I don't deal with this myself, you know, I'm not doing any filing, etc. But this is what clients report to me. And they have to go to the office to find out what's happening. And since the stated objective of introducing technology, the stated objective of the government is to reduce interface and thereby hopefully reduce corruption, it doesn't seem to be working that well as of now. I think that is where all of us have a role to keep on pointing out what is wrong, what needs to be done. Otherwise, in principle, it is a great thing, but we still have a long way to go.
Great. And I'm just going to connect it to the next question that I have, Radha. I mean, you mentioned that all of us have a role to play, right? So what would you tell or advise women to drive greater impact in fintech? And just to add on to that question, you know, today you are actually addressing a lot of people who come from a CA background. There are lawyers who are, you know, experts in tax, and we also have technologists who've been working on the tax side of it, right? So what advice would you give to women to drive greater impact in fintech?
This would be advice for anybody in the area, but I think
Sure.
Specifically for women, maybe women need this advice more. I would always say, while you're working on whatever area is allotted to you, always look at the bigger picture, the context of that, the environment in which that functions, the larger economic scheme of things, because it is that larger picture which enables you to deliver quality on that micro thing. And it has been my observation that women do this less. They are more into micro, and they don't, I mean, it's not correct to make generalizations, but I've seen this often, that they neglect the bigger picture. So I think they would really be very effective, because women are good anyway at doing their work in a systematic and competent way. So if they were able to get this input, the larger and theoretical input, then they would be unbeatable.
Absolutely. That's actually motivating for our people. And what do you think as an organization, what can Avlara do to really, help in terms of, the getting to the overall goal of a well-informed tax compliant environment? How do you think we can help?
Well, since you're working with tax tech and you're dealing with clients and coming across their problems on a day-to-day basis, coming across the glitches in the system on a day-to-day basis, as I said, it is at this stage, it is the duty of all of us to point out what is wrong and what can be done to remedy it. So when you have that information, you're intimately, interacting with the system and you know what needs to be done. This has to be brought to the notice of the government, either directly or through the blog or whatever, and also through industry associations, because that's where you'll be able to bring about change.
That is phenomenal. I have one last question.
Just one more thing. Tax compliance, when you're dealing with clients, to encourage it always, to point out that it is, what I've seen about tax evasion is very often, in about 1/3 of the cases, let me say, tax evasion is not deliberate. It is born of ignorance, so-called tax evasion. So to keep on educating the client, because again, you have access to the client.
Yes,
would be great.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. One last question from my side before we go into the Q&A from the Zoom one. One last advice to the Avalara community about their career trajectory, right? So we are an exception if you really look at the technology companies and product companies. We are in a very niche area, indirect tax expertise, right? So what would you tell us?
Look, I'm not a tech person, but I would say to all the people working in tax, indirect tax is an area of great nuance. And nobody can really master it until you see the tendency often is to, in trying to understand something, is to read a lot and to, for example, you read a blog, you read an article, you see what is the conclusion that this person has come to. So what you do is you digest the conclusion. I would say no, please digest the process of reasoning and follow it up, because that's how the knowledge comes. So if he's saying section 7 says this, but section 16 says this, and the Companies Act says that, I mean, I would say take the trouble. I have a lot of people who are working with it. Take the trouble to follow up on each of these and check it out, so that tomorrow you can reason this out for yourself. Because you want to be not only tax automation, you also want to be tax expert, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
So that's what I'm
actually going to take some more. Okay, absolutely. I'm going to take some more time because there are questions that are coming my way as well. Again, people want to ask questions. So I'll take a couple of more minutes to ask some more questions. One of the questions that was really liked across our channel was this one, right? Is it okay to say no sometimes? How did you manage to deal with the consequences of the same? This is really appreciated by a lot of women in the channel.
Clear what the no is to. If the no is to a professional favor or to some pressure being exerted by a powerful person, yes, I've been there, I've done it, and nothing happened. I think one should just conquer the fear. I've said no to 2 central ministers, and nothing happened. They just push you, and if the no is to a personal favor, then definitely, please never compromise. I would say either professional or personal integrity to what? To please somebody, to get a short-term advantage in career, or to avoid what you think is a disadvantage. Not at all worth it. Please say
that is absolutely wonderful, because I think that's something that we need to keep telling ourselves, saying that, those shorter term goals are going to be forgotten when you are looking at a long career trajectory or a happy life, right? So that's something that people should practice. Women and men should practice when it comes to choices. There are a couple of more questions.
Yeah, no, did they mean the no in personal life, perhaps family life? Do something for the family. There also one has to learn to draw boundaries and say no.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. One more question. What do you do every day to keep yourself motivated and be best at what you do?
I just work. I'm already motivated. I don't need to. I love my work. I don't need any external motivation.
All right. Okay, that's fair. So I'm going to hand this over to Bhumika and Indrani for more questions on the channel and on our question answer on the chat itself. So let's see what we've got.
Thank you, Manjula, and thank you, ma'am. I have no words to say. I mean, your story and journey is inspirational of such a strong-headed woman full of knowledge and integrity. I mean, I'm truly inspired. And we have a couple of questions coming in everywhere, so I'm going to be fast and get to the point. So this one is a very interesting one. When you began your career many years ago, did you ever imagine that you would be a leader in a male-dominated profession? And who inspired you? I think this is a very fantastic question to start with.
I would say I'm a leader, number one. Number two, I never imagined I would really do very well. I do remember that when we were probationers, and we were asked, each of us, what is it? Because Customs and Excise has very diverse fields of work. You can perhaps spend your entire career sitting at a desk, or you can spend your entire career never having sat at a desk, So they asked, all of you, what is it you want to do in your career? So I was the first to put up my hand and I said, anti-smuggling, anti-evasion. And everybody laughed. Okay. they laughed and then look at you, because I was one petite thing and I was also very shy. Look at you and look at what is it that you want to do. So from there, yes, it's been quite a journey. And who inspired me? Strangely, it was another woman who was the sister of a classmate of mine when I was giving my choices in the civil services options. She said, put IRS, Customs and Central Excise on top. I had never heard of it. I said, what is this? Why? She said, because I'm working there and it's such exciting and interesting work. You will not find it elsewhere without much political interference. Yes, you will find it in some services, but you'll have the politician breathing down your neck all the time. Whereas here, you're relatively independent and you have such variety of work and such challenges. And that's how I did it. Otherwise, I never imagined. And then it was so interesting all along. There was never a dull moment. So that's what kept me going.
Thank you, ma'am. So the next question that we have is that, is it really difficult or almost impossible for a revenue officer to have an assessee mindset? Did this cause a lot of transfers?
I think somewhere in the beginning of this interaction, I explained to you how, I had to change my mindset because I was just naturally inclined to help the taxpayer. And wherever possible, I would give that relief or that benefit. But, it is impossible for a revenue officer to have an assessee mindset. That is impossible because the assessee will always say, why can't I get this benefit? Whereas the revenue officer has to explain to the Controller General's audit why he gave this benefit. So there is a shift in the emphasis. So unless it is 100% defensible, a revenue officer cannot give that benefit. So if the revenue officer gives the benefit when it is 100% defensible, please say he's a great revenue officer, because most will just play safe and say, why should I give it? Let him go and appeal.
I see. And ma'am, there's a second part to this question that is coming live, is that, is there any transfer that you had to deal with which you were not prepared for, and was it in a tough area?
You mean transfer posting wise?
Yes, posting wise.
Yeah, I was. I had to take some 6 to 9 months leave twice because of children being small and me being transferred to another station. The first time that transfer finally got cancelled and changed, and I was retained in the place I was.
Okay.
The second time, finally, there was a lot of family up and down, extended family intervention, etc. And cook was arranged and arrangements were made, and I went. I went and worked in the other place, which was not far. It was an overnight journey. I used to come home every weekend. And I stayed there for some 3-4 months until some senior officer came to my rescue and created a post for me in the place I was. And people helped. My departmental people have always been very supportive and helpful. So it happens, one manages and balances.
Thank you, ma'am. The other question that is just popped up is that, do you have a specific genre of books that you love to read and you would advise the women of today, given your interest and your spirit in writing?
I love detective novels, but I won't say I advise people to read them. I love detective novels because of the detective work I've done in the department. But the genre that I love and would advise women to read and everybody to read is biographies and autobiographies. Because you can follow the journey of a person who has become so prominent as to now inspire people to want to read about his life. And it is sometimes very enlightening. So whenever I get hold of one, I've read a diverse range of biographies and autobiographies. Good stuff.
Thank you, ma'am. So I'll get on quickly to the next question. It says that, what are your suggestions on the younger generation, how they can work on making an unbiased and inclusive environment for people?
Unbiased and inclusive environment. This is...
Yes, ma'am. And actually, this can be coupled with, because we have a lot of questions about unknown biases. This is the other one that has come in the relation to that, is that how do you identify the unknown biases that you might have and not let them interfere in decision making? So the question revolves around, how do you see things as they are and not how you want them to be, the differentiating decision that you have to make.
It's a lifelong journey. Even today, I find myself, I notice in myself something which needs to be corrected. As long as you are aware that perhaps I have these biases. The thing is, we come out of our family environments like a butterfly coming out of a cocoon, and we are formed in a certain way, right? Yes. So you sort of go along for maybe a decade or more without realizing that there are other ways, there are other shapes of butterflies, there are other animals, So I think by training oneself to listen with an open mind,
yes,
one can slowly eliminate these things. And by being aware that one is living in a box, so you have to keep on opening it out.
Thank you for answering that. I think this is also a very interesting and question that people are asking, is that, do you think that in India, it is kind of difficult to have custom knowledge rather than in other countries like, the US, Canada, because they have more courses, more degrees. And personally, in my own experience as a chartered accountant, I thought that in my syllabus, indirect tax was covered away not a very significant portion as compared to direct tax and everything else. So do you think specifically in India, it's kind of difficult to draw the attention on that and to get more knowledge on customs and knowledge?
Yeah, I do think so. Till recently, even law courses barely touched upon indirect tax.
Yes.
And where there's a course in taxation, it used to be income tax and sales tax, but not the central indirect taxes. They're beginning to remedy that, but there's one big problem, which I think I should harken back to Manjula's question as to what Avalara or anybody else in that field can do. There's one big problem, and that is you don't get the material online at all. I mean, you don't get free access to updated law and related material in pertaining to Indian taxation law or indirect tax law. So if somebody would put this up, I mean, not necessarily free. I actually thought I'll make a blog and a website and do this myself, but it's too much for one person or even assisted by one or two people.
Yes.
What a person needs is if he wants to find out about something, whether you as a CA or a student or a taxpayer, he wants to find out about something, he should be able to go onto a site, search for it, find the law, find the related case law,
Yes.
and be able to, at least to some extent, educate himself. As of now in India, it's difficult.
Yes, I agree with you.
That's actually a very, very good point for us to consider, Bhumika.
Yes. That's absolutely true, Manjula, especially personally for me, being a part of the content research department, that we are only, ma'am, focused on, sort of analyzing the laws all over the world, interpreting them and making sure that the research is thorough, accurate, and the analysis is correct. And then we sort of deploy that in our technology, and it's a blend of both. So Avalara will start, is making their small contribution in getting the spotlight on indirect tax along with automation. But
yeah.
I think it's a long journey. There is this one very interesting question, and this would be the last one because I think I've covered more or less most of the questions that came on the Slack channel. Is that what is the one thing that you needed to let go in your life in order to be where you are right now?
Fear.
That's a very good
Fear
answer.
is what always stood in the way. Fear of failure, fear of people not approving, fear of being judged, fear of everything, anything and everything. Each time one had to conquer fear, and then only one could get anywhere. For example, when I quit the department, there was definitely fear. I'm stepping out into the unknown. Even worse than that, I quit the department, I joined a law firm. After 3 years, I left the law firm and came out to be an independent practitioner. That was a lot of fear I had to conquer. What if nobody comes to me? So one has to deal with fear, and if you conquer it, then lots can be done. Women especially have a lot of fear.
Absolutely.
Radha, I just wanted to add here, I recently read Michelle Obama's book, and one of the sentences that caught all our attention is failure is a feeling before even it's actually, an event that happens, right? So what you said in terms of fear of failure, I think that's something that makes a lot of us step back in terms of what we ought to do in our careers and in the decisions that we need to make.
Yes, Michelle Obama's book was so inspiring. I read it too, yeah. I think everybody should read it.
Totally agree. Regardless of the gender, that's something which definitely talks about how you should look at your life in a very positive way and look at what you need to do. It's an amazing book. Yeah, agree with you totally.
Absolutely. I think, Manjula, we should start our book club with this as a first book review.
We should.
Yes. So we have one last question. And we have questions of the on the panel pouring. So this one is kind of interesting, as in terms of they want to know about what is your take on how organizational and professional communities can build and boost the confidence of women workforce.
Once more.
Yes. So how can organizations and professional communities build and boost the confidence of women workforce? How can we contribute to that? Any practices that you can share where you have seen great results culminating in women taking on new challenges and being fearless?
I think there should be a channel open for women to talk with a senior person in case they are feeling in any way inadequate or discriminated by virtue of being a woman. And this interaction should, it needs a lot of sensitizing the senior person also, that this interaction should be non-judgmental. You shouldn't immediately jump to the conclusion that there is something psychologically wrong with this young woman, etc. So those channels should be opened for a woman to feel that she can talk through a problem. Because talking to peers is not a great idea nowadays workplaces are very competitive. So it is best not to share vulnerability with peers. So perhaps, some kind of counseling, internal, external, I can't make up my mind on that. What do you think? Do you think external is better or it might carry a stigma? But definitely I have found that counseling is needed. I've seen this when I taught this course in Nalsar also, Law University. And I noticed that the best and brightest who are coming through very difficult competitive exams there. And yet the women are not, they don't speak up easily. And many of them came to me afterwards in my office singly to share their problems as to what was making them underconfident. And very often I was able to give them a one-line solution to the problem. Why am I not being taken seriously? I listened to her for 10 minutes and said, because you do not speak in complete sentences. This is simple things like that. There are habits that girls pick up from their environment and are unaware of. So maybe an external counselor would help. I don't know. I'm just trying to visualize a scenario.
I think, agree. We need some kind of an intervention where where people and women especially can open up and talk. There could be coaches, mentors, counselors for definitely who they can reach out to and open up and talk about their problems. A little bit of a push can actually make a lot of difference in terms of how we react to situations, right? So, absolutely.
Counselors is that they don't know the environment. That's why I was hesitating between an external counselor and a senior person within the organization. So that's for somebody like Manjula to make the choice, what is most suitable.
Sure, Radha, thank you.
So I see that we have 10 minutes and we have another new question in the Q&A panel. And this one is interesting, and it came into my mind too, because is that, do you regret any choices that you made? And how do you deal with that, that if it, and not take it in a negative way? If you made a wrong choice or a wrong decision?
When you've come as far in life as I have, you see a pattern, and it's a cliche, it's very trite, but I finally come to believe it very deeply that everything happens for the good. So life is like a huge tapestry, and one little design which you have not understood at the time that this design was being knotted and you were getting all knotted up inside it was actually the best thing that could ever have happened to you. Or a choice or a decision that you made, whenever you make it, it's not just that you're making a decision, absolutely impartially and objectively. You are driven to make decisions by various circumstances and factors. So you make the best possible decision in that, or maybe not the best possible. However, I don't regret one bit, any of it, because it's all turned out so good. No regrets.
Thank you, ma'am. I mean, I think there's a lot to take from this answer. I see that there is this question that we have about the IRS profession, and just to ask out of curiosity, the employee wants to know if that the IRS profession is divided into income tax and customs, and if there are some key differences in the modes of working, the postings between the two, and how you lived your life through this beautiful journey. So just if you could highlight in brief how this whole system works. I mean, this is a very elaborate question, but if you have to sharing.
IRS income tax is a different service altogether.
Right.
In the civil services listing, it is separate. It has nothing to do with IRS, customs and central excise. They carry this common appellation because they were up to 1963, I think, it was one service. It was called a service which operated under the Central Boards of Revenue.
Okay.
And then it was split into Central Board of Direct Taxes and Central Board of Excise and Customs, now called Central Board of Indirect Taxes. So you choose one or the other. You can't move between them.
Okay.
Whereas within the Customs and Excise, you can at Group A level, not below that. At Group A level, you are recruited to cover customs and excise and service tax and narcotics. A little known thing. There is narcotics also in this, where you're in charge of the opium growing, the opium processing, etc. So, yeah, what was the next part of the question?
Yes, ma'am. I think they wanted to know the distinguish between the two, and I think it's answered.
Yeah.
Yes. So there are no more questions, and I think I've covered most of them coming from the Slack channel. Apologies, I've tried to combine because there were too many to be covered in this time. So we blended a set of questions, and so that ma'am can address maximum. Manjula, ma'am, over to you. You guys have any ending notes to this inspirational and motivational session?
I just need to say that it's just been so inspiring, Radha. I think we would still have a lot more questions. I'm sure people would want to talk to you more. I'm just so glad that we've connected and you were able to spend time with us. I don't think we can thank you enough for your inputs.
Well, and the questions were lovely. I enjoyed the interaction. So thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you for the participants who were really active. Thank you so much, guys, for this.